Right. We are live. Welcome everybody to the Node.js security team meeting. I believe that the last one of January 2025. Before we start, does anybody have any announcement? I do have one. We will have security release planned for next week. So we have issued the blog post this week. And also, this secret release will issue CVEs for end-of-life versions of Node.js. So if you are using Node.js 12, Node.js 14, 17, 16, you will get a secret warning if you are using a secret scanner. So make sure to upgrade your version to the latest LTS to make sure you are running Node.js in a secured space. Um, as well mentioned by Michael, go to the minutes and put your name. That would be amazing for us. And usual, we go to the any other announcement? Nope. All right. Um, we go to the vulnerability review, open SSF scorecard, and then we go to the regular agenda. So for vulnerability review, let me check what we have. We don't have anything else since last meeting. Uh, One important thing to mention is that the issue 193, which is upgrade Node.js to latest NPM version on Node.js 22, for instance, um, it's unlikely to happen on this a secret release because this doesn't fall in our threat model, or it is also a false positive on Node.js from Node.js side. So it's unlikely to land it on Node.js 18, for instance, because we will be patching an NPM dependency ourselves, and we don't have guarantee that it will break folks using Node.js 18. So considering this is not a vulnerability on Node.js, it's unlikely to happen. So if you are getting the security scanner from the security scanner a warning, tell them to ignore it.
Which issue is that, just so I can add it to the minutes?
Issue 193.
93. Okay, thanks.
I set in the chat
Got
and
it.
then. All right, moving on. To open SSF scorecard monitor review, Ulysses,
Let me
I
say
think.
was muted. Yeah. I got audio now, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I created the PR, which is the 1424. So far seems good. We have some good increasing related to good maintenance practices in place, like remove permissions from pipelines or say validations for more commits and stuff like that. As far as I can see, the ones that are decreasing, those are the typical oscillations that we see from time to time from the API. So nothing from our side, actually. No action needed from our side.
Okay. One thing that I noticed is okay, ZB is on the attendees. Let me promote him. Is we have created some actions since the last run of step security. So my suggestion is to run it again on Node.js core. So we update all the workflows that are not using the commit instead of using tags, just to make
Okay.
sure we align that. So I can do that right now. Let me just do it. Let me see if their app is still running. It seems so. Yes, it's running. So once it's done, it will open the pull request and I will send in the chat.
Fantastic.
Quick question. Is there any way to automate that? That sounds like the kind of thing that's going to continually happen. So if we could schedule that to run once a month,
Yeah, that would be
it
great.
would.
As far as I know, their automation is only via web page. I don't think they have an API or anything related to this, but we could open an issue in the security working group and ping the maintainers. I think they also have access to our repository.
Because basically, I think it just would open an issue, a PR, and then we could look at that PR. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
I think that would be a good idea because the less we have to remember, the more things just happen, the better.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, okay, let me update. Step secured hardened runner. No, it doesn't. Okay, let me check. No, it couldn't find any in any place of our code that we are using the tag, so I think we are fine. The only recommendation from the step secured dashboard is to include their header runner, but I don't think we want that, to be honest. And the other suggestions were to the dApps like OpenSSL, but it's out of our scope, I would say.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe we have like all the things they check covered already. It might be.
Yeah, it might be all of this covered, yeah.
Okay.
In any case, I'm sending in the chat if you want to see the dashboard yourself. You might need to get read access or log into GitHub, but that works. Moving on, Node.js regular agenda. We have the pull request from Microsoft to include WDAC integration to Node.js. I don't think they have joined us today to discuss it. The last feedback was to um, to make it completely isolate and behind a compile time flag so we can test it and like a prior version of an experimental just to test it because most of the Windows APIs they are synchronous and there's no support to run it asynchronous even through if we imagine a support via libuv for instance that would happen so I believe that it would make apps very slow. So they are still figuring it out. So no feedback so far. Moving on, Node.js security workgroup agenda. Add a warning to end of life versions. As I have mentioned in the beginning of this meeting, we will issue CVEs for end of life versions of Node.js in the next security release. Also, I had another suggestion to include a warning to CV to end of life versions of Node.js, but I prefer to wait to see the impact of the CVEs, and then we decide if that's we look to the downloads uh, of Node.js or of end of life versions and see if people are still using it massively. And in case of true, we could think about adding a warning as a patch version of Node.js. Do you agree? Oh, ZB?
Uh, yeah, first of all, I agree this is a good idea. Second, I don't know if this was raised before, but the original idea of a warning from the binary itself was saying to release another version with the warning, which I think makes it very unlikely to reach the people who would get stuck on a version. And I had this idea where we could have each Node.js version have a feature that checks whether based on current date, it's already time to show the warning, and it would show the warning and point to the website with the releases in case we decided to increase the maintenance time on a version, but the warning could still be emitted by the local date.
Marco?
Um, like ideally, I would agree with the warning. The thing is that it breaks. First of all, it breaks a lot of tests because all of those tests that check if standard R is equals to empty string, they will all fail. So it will need a lot of changes in the code base, or you can just just YOLO it at the test and say, hey, that's it. But it might break some people. So
Yeah, I think
it,
the intention is to break some people, but also just talking about the ZB idea of checking the date. I don't think that we have discussed that. We thought about different approaches. The first one is to hard code the end of life date of this version. But the problem is that sometimes we change the date based on our dependencies. For instance, OpenSSL changed their LTS date, and we need to change the Node.js 22 as well. So for those versions that were hard coded, they can't get that update unless they upgrade the version. So that would be a problem. And the second approach we thought was to perform a remote call to the Node.js to check if they are out of date or not. Pretty much what is my node vulnerable does. But remote call is also out of the scope because that would be a huge mess. And I imagine that if the server goes down, people will be freaking out.
yeah.
And yeah, Michael?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I started out with exactly the same thought, like, hey, we got to make it so it just starts to happen. But then we did discuss, and it was like the CVEs, like that's your scanner reports something, but your app keeps running. The warning we've seen actually can stop your apps from running, and we really don't think that we should be like breaking people. If they choose to run with an old version, we don't want it to start to fall over because it hit a certain date. Like that's a disaster waiting to happen. Um, so that's why like I like the CVE one much better because it raises it and like they may have to justify to their security group why they continue to run with it, but it doesn't actually break anything, right? And that's so after that, after somebody pointed that out to me, I'm like, yeah, okay, that time thing isn't going to make sense.
Um,
At
yeah,
least if
on
they're
the
upgrading to a newer version, like you're going through a QA usually, and like you can see, like, okay, this is, I won't upgrade or whatever. So Marco, go ahead.
yeah, I just want to say that on the CVE thing, I would have Hero Dev's total support to work on if we decide to start issuing CVs for checking CVs and doing releasing CVs for older versions. I would have total support from the company also on the security triaging and everything. So I talked with my manager, and Hero Devs is willing to sponsor the work if we decide to make it happen.
Right, the one where we would add like we basically do the new release that has the warning, right?
Yes, and also if we decide to, like, whenever we receive a new report, test if it's reproducible on older versions.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a different discussion. I have some thoughts, but I don't want to jump into that discussion now. But yeah, that makes sense. Um, so yeah, I don't think we have anything else to discuss on that part. We need to wait for the upcoming secret release, see the impact of the CVEs. I don't know if we should write a blog post. I believe that for the post release of the secret release, we need to mention that we be issuing the CVEs, list all of them, and tell them to upgrade. I don't think we have migration guides, right? We might have one for 18 to 20, but I don't think we have migration guides for everything. Um, but yeah, I think that makes sense. Anything else to discuss on this? Nope. All right. I'll drop it from the agenda, and I will make it never stale just to make sure we are not closing it yet. And the next item in our agenda is the Node.js maintenance threat model, which we usually takes more time. So I suggest to jump into the out build process for dependencies and automate secret release process. Michael, do you have any updates on the build process for dependencies?
Yeah. So I don't know if this is new since the last time, but like the three WASM dependencies now do use a common shared WASM container. So we now have like a better sort of snapshot of what's used. The next thing I want to look at is the updaters. And I did look at the CGS module Xer and Amero, and there's some work to be done there so that we actually build the WASM from what's in the deps directory from Node.js. Like they both, I think today kind of do an npm install. So, and I think, well, I know in some cases Marco has added stuff to the updaters where it's like, hey, and we're gonna create our own package JSON and try and pin it down. But like, I guess long way of saying, I think there's some work there to bring it into, hey, we can rebuild the WASM and whatever needs to be built from the what we store in our dApps, which is I think our goal based on our past discussions. So that's something still on my plate is kind of like a background task that I'll make progress as we go along.
Okay, fine. The next one is the automation of security release. Well, for this security release, I made a lot of updates, but I forgot to link to this issue. I can make it later, but basically, I'm doing several improvements. If you go to Node.js/node core you choose, you will see a bunch of requests I have landed, including others to different repositories, changelog maker, commit string, and things like that. I'll try to link update the description to link to this pull request, but we made a very good progress on this. And we have just a final steps to close it because I believe this is almost done. Like people can create security release very easy, and that's working very, very well. Uh, I think that's it. And then we can jump to the Node.js threat model. I'll drop in the chat the hack MD we are using. Basically, to access this, you need to create an account, but this is very easy. You can connect to your GitHub one if you want. And I've moved the previous content, which is the initial table to the Node.js security working group repository. If you see, there is a pull request as well in the comment. And that's working. That seems good. And then we need just to continue with the threads. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
All right. So we have the thread number 1, malicious release binary generation in Node.js release build process. So we are creating a scenario, and then we check the vectors and see if depending on the resource of Node.js, if it could affect Node.js or it could have an impact, a negative impact in the Node.js space. So I don't know if we have we concluded the first one. Long time without seeing that.
I think it's kind of concluded.
Yeah, I think so. So to change the binary generation and make it malicious, an attacker would need to have write access to the Node.js build or write access to the Jenkins CI release, infra release, build infra, website infra, and or read access to 1Password or private secrets. I don't know exactly. Okay. Yeah.
I think that one's like probably done enough. We could try and do the next ones.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we don't want to change anything of that. This is just the
Yeah.
view, right? Okay. Then we have the next steps. Malicious Docker images. Okay. Oh, we are just throwing ideas. We have
Yeah,
the
I think well we could just like copy that if that resource table, I think because it maps above and like paste it in and say like, okay, let's just go through and do the similar.
Yep.
I wonder, um, we we have defined in a few months ago that we prefer that all dependency updates arise from the GitHub automation bot or dependency updates, right? But is that possible for someone to use the commit username and commit email from the bot and try to impersonate it, changing the dApps, usually looking like a regular update, but including a malicious code on it? Does someone know if that's possible?
I mean, Git trusts whatever you put in Git history.
Yeah.
So you would have to make sure that the bot is recognized by not only the name, but also the fact that the commits are signed by the account. And GitHub provides some ways to control for that.
Let me check if our bot generates pull requests with signed commits. That it's an interesting thing.
Does that fit into this threat model, or is that back to what can people who've been given no access do?
Sorry?
Right? Because you're basically like, I could pretend to be you,
Yeah,
similarly, like through some hack of GitHub or something like that. I think this is more about we've given people privileges. What does that open us up to? Because like we want to say, like, have we, if we restrict access, like our general approach is we want to give people as much access as we can to let them do the work that they need to do. The flip
correct.
side is when we give people access, we introduce some risks, and this is to help us look at those risks and say, well, what have we given to each of the different groups? And like if, for example, like all collaborators could now, do something that means we should think about that more carefully than if it's like, we've just let the people who are on the TSC, for example, do those things. So I
No,
think that kind of like hacking stuff might be a separate discussion. Good to maybe think about, but not necessarily in this part.
I believe that my point on that question was mostly because at some point we will create a threat that is uh, who or which access you would need to inject malicious code to Node.js code base. Uh, in my opinion, or in my point of view, you should have right access direct to the main to do that. If you open a pull request, someone would need to revisit that, uh, and uh, and then possibly your malicious code will be we won't accept it, and that's why we also are only accepting dependency updates from the Panda bot from or dependency bot. But if someone impersonated the dependency bot, we could just overlook uh, and a malicious code could be injected to the Node.js code base. I'm just thinking if that's possible, because if that's if the only way to verify that is to check if the commit is the signature of the commit is the one that we expect from the bot, we are doing it wrong because the commit I'm saying that I sent in the chat doesn't have any signature, so anyone could do that. Anyone with as a Node.js member, anyone with core member. I think I can try to create a commit trying to impersonate the bot just to check if that works.
What do you mean by trying to impersonate the bot? It's going to be created by some user other than the bot.
Now, if you change the local config, the commit author and commit email, you can impersonate the same way you add a co-authored by and
Mm.
you include the email.
Yeah, the easiest way would be to take the existing branch, check it out locally, modify it, and not create a separate commit,
Yeah.
but modify the commit in place and push it back up. And if you
Yeah, but
configure it, if you
that would be
configure
added as
Git
free.
correctly, you don't leave a trace of this being a different user.
Yeah, but that would make slight things slight easier to track because you have the audit of the GitHub, so you can easily see who did that.
So
That's
with audit, you're going to see who did that anyway, right?
uh,
They won't impersonate the bot on authorizing to GitHub. They can only impersonate the bot in Git history.
okay.
So it's the matter of how GitHub is going to surface that information.
I think the risk that you're thinking about is there's a PR. We go to look at that PR and we approve it more easily because it's the GitHub bot, right?
Yes, correct.
So the key thing is like when we go in the UI, can it look like the GitHub bot when somebody else created?
Yes, I think so. That's my question actually, but I believe that could be possible. I don't know. I will need to try. Marco?
So I had this question for a long time because I think that for example, the npm bot opening pull request to update npm was not very same thing because like someone could create an account with similar name and open a PR and would just say, hey, this is the npm bot. It's not part of our organization, so we don't see the label there is a bot because for the Node.js bot, you see that it's part of the organization because it has a small label. It's not the best. It's not very like you don't see it at first sight, but if you look carefully, you can see that it has a label. But for other bots, that's not the case. But yeah, a GitHub bot should be fine. Like
Uh,
Node.js bot, sorry.
the Node.js GitHub bot has the member label, but it
Yeah.
would mean that anyone in any working group would be able to do that.
Well, it has also the name of Node.js GitHub bot, which
No.
and it should also say that it's a bot.
I think the main thing, like, I think it's like what we probably want is something which will, like, ideally, which would actually validate that things that are submitted by bots. Like we could have another check which ran that, like something which ran and basically said, whoa, this is like impersonating the bot, right? Like it's not the bot, or like this is an approved bot or something.
Yeah, I think maybe the commit signature might do that. The problem is that since we are using shared runners in GitHub, that would be slightly difficult. Any case, that I mean, I don't
I think
think,
that could be another thing to look
yeah,
at,
another
but I
issue to
don't think
check.
it's like I think anybody, it's kind of like, can you impersonate somebody else in GitHub? And there are, yeah.
Yeah, you can to some extent, but what we're
Yeah.
discussing is having people who have access to be able to put code on a branch, uh, whether that's any different from being able to put code in main. And the answer is they only need a bit of fishing, really. So whatever level of complexity of the fish we want to consider, there's some level of phishing involved to trick someone into merging content from a branch into main, and it should be considered feasible.
I mean, if it's a collaborator, it can approve and merge it themselves. So, like, yeah, you could go
You,
through
I
the
mean,
way of creating a phishing account and doing all this thing, but at the end of the day, you can do it yourself.
yeah, I have opened up request, an issue just to discuss it. But yeah, I think that that makes sense because we have some rules that if someone tries to merge things on main without the expected metadata, including reviewed by, that would fail. But I believe there are ways to bypass it.
I mean, if you're a collaborator, you can push force on main. So,
But we will receive a notification.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying that I think might there there is a way to do that without sending notification, so making it invisible unless someone click on the comment and see exactly the request author. Um, all right. So I think we could stick to the thread on malicious Docker images, maybe. Or if you have any other thread, we could add to this. That would be great.
I think some of the big ones, like, you know, the concern is like, hey, somebody could actually affect what people get on their machines, which is like the binaries and the Docker images, right? And then I think the next one we got there is like they could also impair our day-to-day project work, right?
Yeah.
So that I think doing those two next makes sense because they are probably, you know, the biggest things people would worry about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So on the malicious Docker images probably is going to be straightforward if we just copy the one for the binary generation. It's kind of almost like an extension, right?
I think so. We need to create an introduction, but we can do it later. But for malicious Docker images, I believe, um, I don't know if we need to have, if you have read access to the private secrets, you could do that. But I think so because do we publish the images somewhere
Yeah, they're
on
published on
GitHub?
Docker.
Okay.
Basically,
Okay.
like the scripts in Node.js, Docker, whatever, I don't know what it's called, but it's Docker something. Those contain the scripts which Docker Hub automatically will, like when those are updated, Docker Hub will automatically pull them at some interval, rebuild the images based on what's in those. So if you modified those Docker images, you could put in whatever you want effectively. You know, you could swap the regular Node.js binaries with something else.
Okay.
So it's almost like, in my mind, it's like if you can you know, basically change the release binaries, um, then you can change the Docker images. And in addition, if you have access to the Docker accounts, like the Docker repo, you can also do it.
Uh, so if I change the binary from the release machine, that would affect the Docker as well? I thought they were run in completely separate machines.
They incorporate the release binaries, except in some instances where they do a rebuild, is what I understand. So like they're
Okay.
basically going to say, I'm gonna, you know, we could look at the Docker files, but I think they'll be like, hey, okay, pull the most recent uh um release of Node. Because like during security releases, we give them a heads up because they need to immediately run And they wait till we publish the binaries because for the most part, I think like Alpine, I don't know. There might be some which are a difference where they actually have to build them, but most of them it's like take the binary, bundle it into the container, and basically you now get a container that when you get it, you can just run node and it'll be there already.
Okay. Yeah, so that I think that's pretty much a copy paste from malicious release binaries. Maybe we don't need to have we should just merge it. Not
I think the thing though is that there is an additional set of people who can't change the release binaries, but who can change those. And maybe it shows that like there's an additional group. There's the or it's either that or like we don't seem to have, I think in the do we? Oh, I see. I'm looking at the one where the move content. Did we move the content there? I'm looking at the HackMD. I was looking for where the
it was moved to the Node.js security working group. There's a pull request link.
okay. Sorry, I'm just gonna open that up. Like it might be reasonable to add in the Docker team as a group of users.
But do they have access to right access to change the publish? Because I thought they only have um, read access or to the repository, but that doesn't reflect the published image.
They can, no, the Docker team basically manages what's in those Docker files, which basically controls exactly is what is in the containers.
Okay. So yeah, I think that makes sense to include those, I guess.
Oh, this one, okay.
They are a
Uh,
subset of
sorry,
node.js.
where's the PR that like so what are we actually looking at now is my question. I'm confused in terms of should I be looking at the Hacker MD or something else?
I'm looking to the HackMD to
Okay.
create the new threads, but
Okay.
if we need to include new resources or new groups, we need to
Okay.
use the maintainer thread model.
Right, okay. Got it. So yeah, if we don't have the Docker team, that is a team that like when we look at that threat, they do have more privileges than general. Like I think TSC members have access because of just we have access to everything, but like they are a group of people who have access and everybody who has write access could kind of the same way a collaborator can submit yeah, no, I think this is closer to like build team members have access to the build infra, right? So Docker members have access to the Docker infra effectively.
Yeah. I'm looking to the thread model now, and it
Okay.
looks like if we want to include new groups, that's just include a new line. We don't need to update the thread model because uh, the 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 main table is just the access per repository. And
Right, but we might want to introduce like access to the Docker repository.
but it would only mean Docker team, right? Just wondering if that would make sense.
Well, it's kind of like I think at some point we'd like to do a join where you join between like we have the resource and then we say like who has access to the resource and that can be more than one group, right? It just happens to be one in this case, but if we don't
Okay,
have the resource, how do we do that join,
fine,
right?
yeah.
It'll be like, well, wait a sec, you don't have that in the actors.
Okay. So the step one is to include the Node.js Docker Hub. So let me create a pull request now.
Sure.
Meanwhile, a thought, the build process has its dependencies, but the set for building the images is different. So there's dependencies and tools for building images that are different, and being in control of some of those, if we're using any custom forks or personal projects in there instead of infrastructure provided by the project or by Docker itself, these are potential entryways for someone to infiltrate the process. I don't know if we're going this far supply chain wise, but maybe worth checking who has impact on the tooling used for building or publishing the images.
I think, like, I think the tooling that's used is potentially a different, like looking at whether it's safe is kind of a different issue. This is like when we give, should we, like, for example, if the Docker team can do something that's so devastating, maybe we should have more rules on who can join the Docker team, right? So I think this effort was more about like the maintainer threat model, not like, again, what you mentioned is a good thing to look at. Like, yeah, if we're going out those tools, who has control of those? But I kind of see that as a different thing, and we can expand too big too easily, right? So it'd be good to keep this one just on, do the people we
Okay,
give
yeah, this is
access
about
to.
people.
Yeah, this is about people exactly. And then other ones we should look at, but like, let's focus this one on the people.
I've just opened the request
Okay.
to include Docker team. And I just copied and pasted the same permissions from node.js build. I think that would be pretty much the same.
I don't think so. Like, I think the Docker node team doesn't necessarily get access to the build
No,
infrastructure.
no. It's the inverse. We have the resource and we have the teams. And then is the list of teams that has access to the Docker node.
Right. Okay. So Bill, who has access? Well, like, I think we need to add in, like, if you, so yeah, the top, like, we may need to add in at the top somebody, right? Like, we have resource external people, contributors. Um, like, it's the Docker team that we may need to add in line 33.
Okay.
Right? Because like that's a
It is
team that I
because I
think,
feel that they are just a subset of build.
but they don't get access to all the other build stuff.
Yeah. But I believe everybody from build has access to Docker node.
Build has access to all sorts of stuff, but the Docker team doesn't necessarily have access to all of build infra, right? So
Right.
we could make that simplification and say like, okay, we consider the Docker team to be part of infra build, but we really do narrow down who's in like
Okay.
the build group.
So let me create a new column for that. So
Yeah.
um,
So yeah, I'm just looking at I don't know if there's any others that really have too much. Like another simplification that we could put that into. I don't see one that's. While you do that, it does remind me Zigbee, and I think whoever we were talking about like GitHub Actions. We have kind of like created a GitHub Actions as another person. So I think we can actually, assess the risk that they pose through this, like kind of saying like, okay, yeah, GitHub Actions have access to do all these things. Therefore, like now we should look at them to see like how trustworthy they are. How can they be impersonated? Can they whatever, right?
You probably don't want to start that topic, but I have a pretty new way on how to impersonate GitHub Actions.
Sure. So yeah, I right now we're just trying to map what risk does each group of people pose to us, and then we want to delve in like individually. So yeah, we shouldn't dive into that, but like
Yeah.
there'll be a time where this should like based on how much access the GitHub Actions have based on like what threats they could do based on this, then we would want to go back and look at them. Like if it turns out like the GitHub Actions
GitHub Actions is going to be in a similar position to what we just discussed. It's going to be a subset of what the build group has access to, right?
Right. So that's why I was just saying, like this, looking at the maintainer threat model, I see we did add a separate, we already have a column for that.
Okay, I have updated the
Okay.
table.
Okay. Great. So then we can just go back to, okay, okay, I got to sign in. Oh, sure. Okay. Edit. So I think like we can, I don't know, where did you put them at the end or just to be
Yes,
consistent?
in the end, it's just the GitHub is not showing the
Okay.
a good GIF.
So we can then add them. If you can add the common thing, it would be like, and basically I think you need write access. Am I in the right place? Right, you need write access to the Docker.
To the Docker node,
Yeah,
and it might have write access to the CI release. But I pinged the Docker team, the Docker working group in the pull request just to wait for them to review that.
yeah, they don't have any access to the infra,
Mm.
but like they basically the generation of the images is controlled through the Docker node repo. So if you can write those images, then just like a collaborator, if you can put some code in there or a build team member in the build stuff, you can change how they're built.
Okay, so we change it to read.
No, it's right. Like, because if everybody, any collaborator can read that, but you can't change how they're built. But if you could write into the repo, like,
Yeah, yeah.
NPRs and stuff, then you can affect that.
Okay.
We can say modification of Docker files can modify what what we know, just binaries are in the images. So I think we want to look, so the rest of them, like anybody who could have changed the binaries right could also affect the binaries in the thing, in addition to this one, the Docker node team.
Mm-hmm.
If you have right to that, then you can also affect that.
Yeah. Docker team actually, right? Docker node is
Okay, yeah,
just
whatever. I think it's actually Node.
oh
To be
yeah.
consistent, it would be like Node.js / Docker node.
Okay. I will just move it to right below the build just to be in
Yeah,
the
if
same.
that's where you put it in the other one, like it
Yeah,
should
yeah.
just be consistent. Yeah, no, that's good.
Uh, Sounds good to me. Yeah, we might just want to have an introduction to the malicious Docker images, but
Yep.
I believe the first two are ready to be migrated to the Node.js security working group repository. I will create in two pull requests, so it could be it will be very easy um, review that. And I believe we need to ask TSC and build review on those pull requests, right?
The one thing we need to do on the upper one here is sorry, I'll just do that, is to add that new column. I'll do that right this second. So basically, Docker node. So this is basically dash, right? So up in the being able to get them into the binaries, getting access to the Docker node doesn't give you access to change the binaries like
Yeah.
in that sense, right?
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is like we've got this, I think these first ones were meant to be like you can change the binary generation. Another big one we need to cover is like the threat of people getting code into the repo, because I think this one was like if we look at core collaborators, let's see, sorry, go ahead.
No, we didn't see anything. I think it's just Marco saying goodbye.
Okay, yeah. Like I think the first ones, anyway, I think you're right. You can move those two over, and then like we need to have them, we need to have one which is like, getting malicious code into the code base.
I think we already have that covered in that initial pull request. The
Do
the first,
we?
I think so. Look to the maintainers threat model in the Node.js security working group. Let me paste it here for you. It's in the chat. Look to the first threat.
Oh, okay, so we'd already moved at least one thread over. That's
Yeah.
what I'm missing. Okay, got it. Never mind. Yep.
Okay. And then I can move the next two.
Yep.
And I think that's it. For the next meeting, we can find new threads. Maybe I will try to create ones from looking to other maintainers thread model from other projects just to see if we are missing something, and we can take a look. But that's
But
yeah.
one slightly silly question.
I gotta go.
Are we only looking at the threat model from the technical side, or are we also considering a governance side? So, do we want to threat model a group doing a hostile takeover of parts of Node.js functions?
Uh, how would it affect end users from the governance point of view?
Um, Well, it could misalign finance or um, do things to go against the consensus of what the roadmap should be, these kind of things. So
Yeah,
attacks on the governance process in general. Seems very fringe, but
yeah,
thought I'd
maybe
ask.
that would fit more in the OpenJS space than Node.js. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, sounds about right. I'm also happy with the response. No, we're not looking at this at all.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I'm
Just I
not
was
saying
trying to
exactly
think of
that,
what
but
else could be missing.
yeah, that's fine. Perfectly fine. I'm not saying that we are not looking at it, but I'm saying maybe we are focusing more on technical aspect than governance for now. And maybe once we finish that, we could reevaluate it, I think. So that's the end of our meeting. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Jack, for your first meeting. Hope to see you in 2 weeks. Bye bye, folks.